When we are learning, thinking, feeling, we're also strengthening existing synapses and creating new synapses.
A synapse is actually the easiest thing probably to explain in the brain. It's just a connection between two neurons. And it's not actually a physical apposition. There's actually a little gap between the two neurons that are connected, and in the space between them is where neurotransmitters float. So you'll have what we'll call a presynaptic neuron, which is going to be the one sending the signal. So an impulse will come down the long axon of that neuron, and at the end of it, it will result in the release of this neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter will float across the gap to what we will call the postsynaptic neuron, which will take up that neurotransmitter. And if there's enough of it, then that neuron too will fire.
These synapses connect our neurons one to another, strengthening our brains. One important pioneer who contributed to our understanding of synaptic changes in learning was Donald Hebb, a Canadian psychologist who hypothesized how changes in synaptic strengths could account for learning. It's not the repeated exposure that mattered to Hebb. It's the coincident activities that are generated by any important experience. By the Hebb rule, they're co-strengthened because they co-occur.
Donald Hebb's great contribution was to come up with the recognition that neurons that fire together wire together. This was the idea that when you have particular patterns of brain activity over and over and over again, let's say you're a little kid and your mother points out the window and says, "Robin." You see the bird, you hear the word, you have some sense of what this thing is in front of your eyes. And then forever after, you recognize that that is a robin. And that's because the connections in your brain have become stronger. The synapses have been created because of repeated exposure to these two things, the sound, the name of the bird, and the image of the bird. Anyway, Hebb's contribution was to make the first baby steps toward showing that our experiences can leave indelible imprints in the brain, in this case, stronger synapses, and that's what underlies all of learning.
This firing and wiring is the key to learning and plasticity and brain fitness. Whichever synapses are activated together in each moment of time are mutually strengthened.
Well, as I practice any simple skill, basically I engage populations of neurons that represent the details of that skill, moment by moment in time. And basically those neurons are engaged more or less simultaneously in time. And one of the tricks the brain has for specifically strengthening its connections, the connections that contribute to a good effort, to success, is that it strengthens all of those things that happen together in those little moments of time. So that what is activated together in that little moment of time that really matters for the good try are co-strengthened. And they actually mutually strengthen one another as well as are strengthened simultaneously in time, right? And that's the critical to generating a sort of integrated, cooperative action of the brain to drive itself towards higher performance and success.
And how do we know all of these things are happening inside of our brains? We know it because we can see it.
I can put a living individual into a scanner and watch that person's brain function. I can ask that person to count backwards by threes from 100 and see the circuits that are active while they're doing that. How remarkable is that? It's amazing to me that you can actually see the brain functioning while this person performs a task. That has revolutionized our ability to study the human brain. And to me, I think that holds the greatest promise for us to understand all the complexities and all the nuances that make us so human, because you couldn't do that before. And we can actually watch this person in the scanner doing these tasks. That's amazing.
Functional MRI is a way of using MRI, but also watching the blood flow in and out of structures. And the kind of functional MRI I like the best, of course, is functional brain imaging. And what happens there is they're able to take a picture based on the properties of the blood as it comes in of which areas of the brain are getting more blood at any given time. And that can change. And what scientists are doing is they'll correlate the change with the mental task or the stated emotions or mental state of a research subject, and then they can see which parts of the brain are more active at the time that the patient is, or subject, is experiencing an emotional state or thinking about something.
These important advances in technology have allowed us to see inside the brain. Scientists have repeatedly documented the remarkable capacity for human brains of all ages to change. With that ability lies extraordinary potential for growth and rejuvenation. But this change is not extraordinary. In fact, it is what our brains were designed to do.
These are changes that result from the lives we lead and the experiences we have. These are changes that you can induce by learning to play the piano. They are changes that come about when you think new thoughts. So the ways that the brain can change are really opening a lot of eyes on the part of the neuroscience community.
How can we make these changes work for us as we age? More when we return with the Brain Fitness Program.